Record. All right. So today we will talk about labor demand curve, and we will start with the short run labor demand curve, right? You know what demand curve is. So we talk in our principles class and all the other classes, we mostly talk about product demand curve, right? Demand for goods and services. And that, what does that demand curve tell you? It shows the relationship between price of the products and quantity demanded with respect to each price. It is downward sloping because of law of demand. When price is higher, we tend to buy less, and when price is lower, we tend to buy more. The same concept applies to labor market. Just the difference is labor is unique. It's not a commodity, right? So labor services are traded. So basically, I rent my labor hours to AUW in return for my salary. It's not that AUW, because they are paying me, they own me, right? There's no slavery. No one owns, the labor. They can only rent it for a particular salary and particular wage and under particular condition. Okay. So that's why it's very different. Labor market is different than product market. The other aspect is the, if you buy an orange, the orange has absolutely no say whether you will make juice out of it, or you will just eat it raw, or you will put it into some, you will bake it into something, or you will cook with it. The orange absolutely has no voice or say in how the orange will be used. But labor market is unique again, in the sense that labor has a say how labor will be used. So AUW pays me for 40 hours a week, right? So they hire me to teach 6 courses and write some papers and do some like committee work, help out students. So there are certain things that AUW is paying me for. Okay. But if AUW says, Meron, we are paying you for 40 hours a week, but we have calculated that, given your teaching, research, and all the services to the university, you are giving us 38 hours of work. So the remaining 2 hours that you're getting paid for, right? We want you to, sweep the floor, or I don't know, um, do something, I don't know, something that is objectionable, that I cannot, um, compromise on, or I cannot, agree to. Okay. So in that case, what is happening, even though my 40 hours is being sold to AUW, I have a voice in saying that, okay, these 40 hours, you cannot just employ me to do the things that I don't want to do. So there's a mutually agreed upon contract. So labor basically, there's a contract between the employer and the employee, that in return for the salary or the wage rates, you will, I will work for you for 40 hours a week, and but I have a say in how these 40 hours of work will be used. So if you ask me to do, you are hired me to teach a particular course, but now you ask me to teach physics or something, then I might object that no, I'm not going to teach physics. So labor has a say in how labor will be used. An apple and orange, or anything, up table chair, whatever you buy in the product market, they have no say. So that's the, again, difference between product market and labor market. Okay. And the finally is, the conditions of the where the labor is going to be used, right, affects the productivity of the labor. So if you buy an apple, right, just because you put the apple, in your bedroom versus you put the apple in your living room, the taste of the apple will not vary. But if you ask me to teach economics, principles of microeconomics, or if you ask me to financial economics, or if you ask me to teach game theory, you'll see that depending on my expertise and my, everybody has preference. So like, I love teaching game theory because I play games with all students all the time. So that is the most enjoyable for me to teach, right? So and then if you are interested about something, if you really like something, your enthusiasm, it becomes apparent. So you'll see that depending on the, like, not all the courses you have taken with me are the same. Some of the courses, like, you will enjoy, like, and I would love to teach, and some of the courses, okay, I teach, but it's not my energy level, and like the enthusiasm is not great. And also it depends on the semester. You'll see that in fall, all the professors are very energetic and they are eager, but in spring you'll see that, like, everyone is exhausted, and they, especially spring is still okay, but in summer you'll see that everyone is just like, nobody wants to teach because the classes are so long, and it's just like, the there's a diminishing return, right? You've been teaching for the whole year, and then in summer you're basically, because of diminishing return, your productivity is basically nearing zero, right? So then the classes are not as fun. All right, so you understand. But for product market, that's not the case. For labor market, there are lots of things that is different than the product market, because we are talking about human beings here. We're not talking about some object. We're talking about products. So that's why it's very different, because we are talking about the market where labor, like humans, are going to rent out their hours to the employer. So there are lots of issues that, like, you have the safety issues, the contract between the two sides, right? And what happens if the contract is violated? So these things, like, an apple or a, like, your chair or table will never protest, but, like, individual will protest if the contract is broken. So there are lots of differences, and as a result, you'll see the market, even though it's just the labor demand and the supply, the same sort of principles will apply, but still there is some subtle differences, and I will try to point out them as we go along. Okay. All right. So just to give you some introduction, farms hire workers because consumer want to purchase a variety of goods and services. So we know that in the product market, the buyers buy all sorts of products and the farms produce it. And how do the farms produce it? They hire workers, the variable factors. They also, like, rent out capital, employ entrepreneurs, and basically they manage a production process through which the final, like, the products are being produced. So labor is an integral part in the production process, right? So the demand for workers is derived from the wants and desires of the consumers. So if there is a lot of demand for a particular product, then the sellers have to supply to match the demand, right? So they have to increase their production, and when they increase their production, they have to hire more workers to produce these increased demand. So to meet the demand, they have to hire more workers. So that's why often labor demand is called derived demand. The demand for labor is derived from the demand for products that the consumers actually demand. Okay. How many workers are hired and how are they paid? So a farm, whenever it decides to produce a certain number of goods, right? How does the farm decide on certain number of goods? The farm has a motive to make a profit. Every farm is driven by their profit motive, right? So they want to maximize their profit, and in order to maximize their profit, they want to sell. Remember, revenue minus cost is the profit. So if they want to make the revenue as big as possible, so there are two ways to make revenues as big as possible. Revenue is P times Q. So they can increase the price or they can increase Q. So if there is a higher demand for their product, so they have to produce to meet that demand. So they have to increase their queue, and if they have to increase their queue, they have to hire many workers. Now, obviously, there's the other problem that they face is that, okay, I want to hire workers, but what if labor is relatively expensive compared to other inputs? Can I substitute labor by, if I substitute 40 workers with one tractor, is it profitable for me or not, right? So the farm has to decide how many, I have to produce a certain number of output, because that's my target, my revenue. Like, I want to generate certain amount of revenue. To generate certain amount of revenue in a competitive market, the price is fixed for the product, right? In the output market, price is fixed. So given that price, I want to make revenue bigger, so I have to increase Q. In order to increase Q, I have to hire more workers. Now, at the same time, I need more physical capital, I need all of this. if the two products, like capital and labor, are complementary to some extent, but they can also be substitutable, right? So then the farm has to decide how many workers should I hire so that I can reduce my cost, increase my revenue, and make my profit as big as possible. Okay. And then when I hire workers, I have to pay them. So how do I pay them? Do I pay them like per hour or per month? Do I pay them in cash and kind, or a combination of both? So there are lots of ways, like these decisions impact the firm's, like total um, demand for final output. Okay, and the production process. So the production function, remember, this production function is a situation where the farm uses all the raw materials and converts them into output. So output is a function of all the raw materials, right? All the raw materials, or the factor of production, is labor and capital and technology, right? So these are combined together to produce output. So output is a function of labor, capital, and technology. So that is called the production function. How you combine your raw materials to generate your output, that is called the production function. So to make our lives simple, we are just going to say that my production function output is a function of only two factors of production, labor and capital. It can be many things, entrepreneurs, it can be physical capital, financial capital. You can talk about like factory spaces, you can talk about different raw materials, you can bring in the state of the technology, depreciation of capital, so many things you can put in there. But the basic intuition is the same, that you are generating output using labor and capital, and you can lump all the other things that comes to your mind, right? You can either lump them in under the category of variable factor, that is labor, or lump them under the fixed factor, that is capital. So to make our lives easier, and also because we have a xy plane, two-dimensional plane, so we are just going to stick to two factor of production, that is capital and labor. And what happens in the short run? In the short run, we know that labor is a variable factor. We can hire and fire as many workers as we want, but capital is a fixed factor. So in the short run, we cannot purchase more capital. So capital is my fixed factor and labor is my variable factor, and we are going to look at short run labor demand curve. Okay. All right. So remember, rational agents think at the margin. So whenever we talk about any optimal decision making, what is the farm doing? The farm wants to maximize profit. So in order to maximize profit, farm has to figure out how many workers should it hire, right, in relation to the capital, so that the profit is maximized, right? So capital, in a short run, labor and capital are not substituted, because in the short run, capital is fixed. You cannot substitute capital with labor, right? But in the long run, you can, right? So to figure out the optimal quantity of labor the farm should employ, we have to do the marginal analysis, because rational agents think at the margin, right? So to hire the optimal number of workers, we have to know a certain concept, and some of these are, like, the definitions are given here. So the marginal product is one of them. Marginal product of labor is the change in output resulting from hiring an additional worker, holding constant the quantities of other inputs. So we already know that this is a short-run situation. So holding capital constant, marginal productivity of labor is the change in output when you hire one additional worker. So the incremental output generated by an additional worker is marginal productivity of labor. Okay. Similarly, marginal productivity of capital is the change in output resulting out of changing capital by one additional unit holding labor constant. Okay, but this is, even though we are giving the definition over here, but remember, this is only applicable in the long run, when you can vary your capital equipment. In the short run, capital is fixed. Okay. So when marginal products of labor and capital are positive, Okay, that means what does that mean? That means that if you hire more workers, you have positive increase in your output. If you hire more capital, you have positive increase in output. That means marginal productivity of labor and capital in terms of output is like positive. So when the marginal products are positive, that means when the farms are hiring more and more workers, that means these additional workers are generating more and more output. So total product should increase. If marginal productivity is positive, what that means, if I hire one additional worker, these additional worker will generate some more additional output. So if this is positive, right, the rate, if the change in output with respect to change in labor is positive, that means hiring worker actually increases my output. So if I hire more workers, my total product should increase. All right. Slope of the total product curve is basically the marginal product curve. Okay. So what does the total product curve tell you? Remember, like, in principles we talked about total product curve. Total product curve is basically saying that if you keeping capital constant, if you hire more workers, how does your output increase? So let me see if you guys remember. Does this ring a bell? Remember, we covered these graph many times. So this is my total product curve, and who can tell me what will be in this x-axis?
Professor, the quantity of labor.
Yes, so labor hours. And what is in this?
There will be product outcome.
Q, right? Q, or like, sometimes so the
We can
notation.
say y as well.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to write. So
Outcome.
oh no, this is, don't think par or so y or Q, right? So these are all notations for output. Either we use y or we use Q. So this total product curve shows the relationship between labor hours and output. Okay, and we can see that initially it increases at a decreasing rate, right? This is basically, it's a concave curve, so basically it's increasing at a decreasing rate. What does that mean?
That is the marginal, what we can say is that is the increase in labor, the increase in how the increase in one unit labor is basically giving the outcome. So increasing in decreasing manner means that we are getting less outcome by adding more additional labor, if we say literally.
50% right. Okay, so your initial part was good, but the last part is a little something missing. So what happens is, if your marginal productivity of labor becomes negative, so you hire one additional worker but output is like, goes down, so you will not never hire that worker, right? So what happens is, when you start off with 0 workers and you hire, keeping capital constant, you hire the first worker, your output increases. And you can see that in the initial one worker, second worker, third worker, you can see that there's a steep increase in your output. So this means that the rate of change in your output with respect to labor is high, because output is jumping. The more workers you're hiring, basically there's a sharp increase in your product. So marginal productivity rising sharply. But as you keep on hiring more and more workers, what happens? The rate at which output was increasing, that rate becomes lower. It doesn't mean that output becomes negative. Output is still positive, but the rate at which output was increasing when you're hiring more and more workers, that rate goes down. Okay, initially the rate is very high, right? Change in output with respect to change in labor, but eventually because of diminishing returns, right, the rate at which output increases with respect to additional worker becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. The reason for it is because of initial increasing returns to scale and then eventually diminishing returns. So what it means that initially when you are hiring the first worker, second worker, third worker, there is division of labor and as a result efficiency. The workers basically divide the work according to their own comparative advantage. As a result, you can see that output increases at a very steep rate. So you can see the slope is very steep. So output increases at a faster rate. But if you keep on working, adding more and more and more labor, remember capital is still fixed. So the same factory space, if you add ton of workers, so now they will get in each other's way and eventually the rate in increase in output will slow down. It can actually dip down. So you hire more workers and as a result output can be negative. Okay, so that means they are actually hindering each other and then as a result output growth is negative. Okay, but you are a profit maximizing firm, you will never hire workers when output is negative, right? Marginal productivity is negative. So that means this is the the shape of the curve is like this. Initially it's very steep, increasing at an increasing rate, eventually it slows down and it increases at a decreasing rate and flattens out. Okay, it can dip, but if it dips, that level of labor is never hired. Okay, so the total product curve is like this. All right, now the other definition that might be useful for us is average product. So average product is the amount of output produced by the typical worker. How do we calculate average product? We divide total product by the number of workers hired. So average product is nothing but the average output per worker. All right. All right, so you can see that this is the shape again, exactly what we did is shape of total product curve, the number of workers on the x-axis and output in the y-axis, and you can see that initially it's rising very steeply and then eventually it flattens out. Okay, and similarly, the marginal product curve and the total product curve is on the second graph. You can see that the relationship between them as as we know as the relationship between any marginal and average. Okay, when marginal product is higher than average product, right, what will happen? If
Average product will increase.
average product will increase. When marginal product is below the average product
Average product will decrease.
average product will decrease. So we can see the same association. We can see like up to this point, like look at this point. What is happening? Marginal product is below average. So average is declining. And here we can see that marginal is higher than average. So average is rising. Okay. So this is the relationship between average and marginal. Okay. This is very similar to what we did in principle. So I'm going a little faster, but slow, ask me if I need to explain it.
Sir,
Yes.
I did not understand. We can see two different curves over here, right? So, like this one is total product.
Total product curve, and this is the marginal product and the average product. We define marginal and average, right? Do you understand? So this is, we are just plotting the marginal product and the average product curve. Where did the marginal product come from? So in the marginal product is nothing but the slope of the total product curve, right? So you hire one extra worker, what's the extra increment in output? That is marginal. So this is basically the slope of the total product curve at different amounts of workers. So if you go from 0 to 1, what is the increase in output? So the slope of this line gives you the marginal product, and then you go from 1 to 2, the slope at this point gives you the marginal product. You go from 2 to 4, the slope at this point gives you the marginal product, right? So the slope of the total product curve is the marginal product curve, and average product curve is the output per unit of worker, per worker, right? Output per worker. So this is the marginal product curve and this is the average product curve. And we know the relationship between average and marginal. Do you remember the relationship between average and marginal? Let me write it down. Remember, like, we said when marginal product is higher than average product, what will happen?
Average product will increase.
Okay, so look at this. When marginal product, so this is my marginal product curve. When marginal product is higher than average product will be rising, right? So you can see that as long as the marginal product curve is higher than the average product curve, right? The darker red line is higher than the smaller red line, the thinner red line, right? So then marginal average product curve is rising. But when marginal product is below, so it crosses over here and it's below the average product curve, right? The darker line is like, below the thinner line. So we can see that marginal product is below the average product curve starts declining. So the rising part of marginal product curve, as long as it's higher than the marginal product curve is higher than the average product curve is increasing. This slope is positive. When marginal product is below the average product curve is declining. So basically marginal product is intersecting the average product to its peak, right? It's an inverted U, so it's going through the peak of the average product curve. Does it make sense? Everyone, do you see that?
Repeat again, marginal product curve is below the average product curve, then
Okay, just let me so if your marginal grade, so your CGPA is your average grade, okay, and your marginal grade is your GPA. So if your GPA is higher than your CGPA, what will happen to your CGPA?
will increase.
It will increase, right? If your GPA is below your CGPA, what will happen to your CGPA?
Decrease.
you will
The same. So your GPA is marginal product and your CGPA is your average product. If your GPA is higher than your CGPA, then your CGPA will rise. If your GPA is below your CGPA, then your CGPA will fall. Okay, and if they are the same, then it's the highest point of your CGPA. So what is happening here? We can see that as long as the marginal product curve, which is the darker line, is higher than the average product curve, the thinner line is increasing. See, it's the upward sloping. But as soon as the marginal product curve is below, so look, the darker line is below this part of the average product curve, which is the lighter line. So in that situation, we can see that the average product curve, the slope has turned negative. So this part of the average product curve, the slope is rising, and this part the slope is falling. So this is a U-shaped. You see that it's a U-shaped curve, and the MP curve will go through the peak of the average product curve. Does it make sense? Because to the left of this curve, this is increasing, and to the right, it's decreasing. So this has to be the peak, right? It's increasing and then it's falling. So this has to be the like topmost part, right? It has to be the peak. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. I have to clear my drawings. All right, so then we talk about the profit maximizing decision of the firm. Economic profit is defined as total revenue minus total cost. Okay, so if you add one additional worker, what happens? How does total revenue increases? You're hiring one additional worker.
We have to do the marginal analysis, Professor, right, for that?
No, we have to do the margin analysis, but how does it increase the total revenue? You revenue is, what is revenue? What is total revenue? What is the definition of total revenue? Who can tell
Profit
me?
equal to revenue minus cost.
Profit
So
is
revenue equal to, yeah,
profit is equal to revenue minus cost, but I want to know what is the definition of revenue? What is total revenue?
We earn from a business is the revenue, and the things, after paying my selling price, after paying my
No, paying, that's profit. You're talking about profit. I want to know what is
all
TR.
things that we gain from the business, like all the money we get from the business, that's the revenue.
Like from the sales.
From the sales. Very good. Yes, both of you, I think like what you mean is the income I get by selling my output. So total revenue by definition is P into Q. How did you guys forget this? This is the basic stuff that we covered, right? Remember, total revenue is what? P into
Q.
Q, right?
price into quantity, yeah, and
So total revenue is price into quantity. What is the price? In a competitive market, individual seller has no control of the price. It takes the market prices given. So it can decide on whatever the optimal level of output is, and then it sells the optimal output at the market price, and the income generated from this sale is total revenue, right? So now my question to you is, I am hiring one additional worker. How does it increase my total revenue?
Because the quantity increase.
Productivity increases.
Professor, since P is fixed, so the quantity increases. If quantity increases, that says that the total revenue increases. However, even after that, I think for that reason also we have to do the marginal analysis, because we say total.
We have to do the marginal analysis, Anika, you're absolutely right. But I'm asking for the definition. Remember,
Yes,
we have to
Professor,
do
the total
marginal
revenue will
analysis.
increase. Yeah.
Total revenue is P into Q. That why you understand, right? Why total revenue is equal to P into Q. Everyone understands this?
yes,
Okay. So now what is happening is we are increasing labor.
into labor cost.
Did I ask anything about total cost yet? No, right? We are increasing labor. As a result, this additional worker will generate additional output. And Anika, tell me, what do I call this additional output? Marginal?
Professor, yes, marginal output.
Marginal product.
Marginal product. Yeah.
All right, very good. So we call this marginal product, right? All right. So, and we just learned that my total product curve is increasing at a decreasing rate. So initially my marginal product is rising at a very sharper rate, but eventually it will be diminishing, but still it will be positive, because as soon as marginal product becomes negative, no firm will hire because I have to pay this worker. So now, Saima, you tell me, how does hiring an additional worker increase my total cost?
Ma'am, total cost. Ma'am, capital cost plus the labor cost.
Professor, here also when the marginal cost is greater than the total cost, then we can also say that the total cost is increasing.
All right. So L increasing means I have to pay wage to this extra worker, right? So what that means, my total
W.
cost of labor increases. I have to pay wage, right? Nobody's going to work for free for me.
Yes.
So I have to pay, when I increase my worker, L is labor, right? So when I increase my L, I have to pay wage to this extra worker that I'm hiring. As a result, my total cost of labor increases, okay? So my profit, I am increasing one worker. This one worker is generating extra output and I'm selling this extra output in the market at current market price. So that's the extra income from this extra worker, but I have to pay this extra worker. So that's my marginal cost of hiring this extra worker. So this is my marginal cost of this extra worker. So as long as my marginal, product that I am increasing through I have this increased marginal product because of I hired one extra worker and I sell this marginal product at the market. So the extra income for that extra worker, right, is higher than the cost of hiring this extra worker. Then I should hire this worker, right? Does it make sense? That's the marginal analysis that Anika is so excited about. So marginal analysis is telling you that when should you hire this extra worker? If I hire one extra worker and because I hired this extra worker generates extra output for me and I sell this extra output at the current market price, that gives me extra income, my extra revenue, that is my marginal revenue product, right? So that extra revenue is higher than the extra cost of hiring this worker. I should hire this worker. Okay, does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So then the next is okay. So basically this is what I was trying to say. The firm will add one more labor if total revenue rises by more than TC. Okay. So a firm can increase its profit by using less labor if additional revenue generated by the last worker is less than the additional cost of adding that worker. So basically, as long as the extra revenue I get from this extra worker and the extra revenue is higher than the extra cost, I should keep on adding worker. Okay. And when my total revenue is exactly the extra revenue, marginal revenue is exactly equal to the marginal cost, I know that that's my optimal, because if I now hire more workers, my extra revenue will be smaller than the marginal cost. When my marginal cost is greater than my marginal revenue, I should not hire that worker, right? So my optimal decision comes where the extra revenue from the extra worker is higher or equal to the extra cost of the extra worker. I'm using so many extras, but these are all marginal. right? So the marginal revenue, see at by raised by, so the marginal extra revenue from this extra worker, additional worker, is higher or equal to the extra cost of hiring this worker, I should keep on hiring worker. The optimal will come when the additional is less than the additional cost of adding that worker. Okay, so as long as
Professor,
yes.
can you please repeat the optimal thing again? I couldn't catch you.
Okay, so what is optimal? When does, like, optimal happens? Remember marginal cost and marginal benefit, marginal cost and marginal revenue, all the things that we have said. It's the same thing happening here, but we are just adding. There we talked about product market, now we are talking about labor market, but we just said that labor demand comes from the product demand. All right, so why does a farm hire one worker? If the farm hires one worker, this extra worker will generate some extra output. That's the marginal product, right? And this extra output, the marginal product, is going to be sold in the market at the current market price. So that means the extra output will generate extra revenue for the farm, right? Clear up to this point? All right. So hiring one extra worker is generating some extra revenue for the farm. But when you hire this extra worker, you have to pay this extra worker. That's the extra cost of hiring this extra worker, which is marginal cost. So as long as the marginal revenue is higher or equal to the marginal cost of hiring this worker, I should hire this worker. But if the extra cost of hiring this worker is higher than the extra revenue that this worker generates, I should not hire this worker. That is the optimal decision rule. Right? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So the objective of the farm is to maximize profit. Okay, so the total profit of the farm is revenue. Revenue is P into Q, and then W is the wage rate that you pay to the workers, and E is the number of workers or the employees. So W into E. So if you hire 5 workers, then you have to pay them 100 taka each. So your total labor cost is 100 into 5. So the labor cost is wage rate times the number of employees. So that is the labor cost minus RK. R is the rental rate of capital and K is the amount of capital you have, right? So that is RK, the total cost of capital. So the total revenue here is P into Q, like the amount of output the farm generates and sells at the market at a price P. And total cost is the total cost of labor, which is W into E, plus total cost of capital, which is R into K. Okay. And we know that this P is constant and this W and this R are constant, because a perfectly farm cannot influence the price of P. It's a price taking farm, right? And it cannot influence the price of W and R, assuming that labor market is also competitive and capital market is also competitive. So W, R and P are parameters in this situation. You individual farm cannot influence these decisions. So what can the individual farm decide? The individual farm can decide how many workers to hire and what level of output to produce, keeping capital constant in the short run. Okay. All right. So now we are going to talk about the additional revenue that I've been talking about, that the extra marginal revenue product is the extra revenue that results from use of an additional unit of labor. Okay, so that is the value of marginal product. So you hire one extra worker and this extra worker generates extra output, that is marginal product. You sell this extra marginal product into the market at a price P. So you hire one extra worker, that worker produces 10 extra output. You sell this 10 extra output at a price 5 taka in the market. So what's the marginal revenue product of this worker? He generates 10, that is his marginal product, and you sell it at the market at a price 5. So 5 into 10, 50 is the extra marginal revenue that this additional worker is generating. Okay, so marginal revenue product is the value of marginal product from hiring one extra worker. All right. So this is basically indicating the benefit derived from hiring an additional worker holding capital constant. Marginal factor cost or marginal cost of labor is the additional cost associated with use of an additional unit of labor. So to make our life simple, we are just going to say that if you hire an one additional hour of labor, you have to pay W for each hour of extra hour of labor. So W is the marginal factor cost. Okay. So a farm will use more and more labor as long as the marginal revenue product is higher than marginal factor cost. As long as the extra revenue I get from hiring workers is higher than the extra cost I have to incur for hiring laborers, I should keep on hiring workers, right? A farm will use less labor if MRP, if my revenue gain is smaller than my cost, I should not hire workers, I should actually fire people. And the farm optimizes or farm maximizes its profit when the marginal revenue product is exactly equal to marginal factor cost. Okay. So we know that, clear up to this point, this is basically, that's what we just explained so far. Everyone clear?
Yes, Professor.
Okay. So now we know that marginal revenue product is marginal revenue times P. So you hire one extra worker, this extra worker generates this marginal product, you sell this marginal product at the market price, right? Each additional unit, what is marginal revenue? What is the definition of marginal revenue? The extra
The
revenue from
change in revenue due
the
to the change in quantity.
Excellent. So you sell one extra output in the market and extra revenue you gain by this. So you hire one additional worker. These additional worker generates these additional output. You sell each of these additional output and the revenue gained from this additional output is the marginal revenue. So the total revenue, marginal revenue product is the value of the marginal product that the extra worker produces. So MR into MP is your marginal revenue product. So marginal revenue product is how your total revenue changes when you hire one extra worker. Okay. And marginal revenue is how your total revenue changes when your output increases by 1 unit. And marginal product is how your output changes when you hire one additional worker. Okay. So now you see that marginal revenue product is the multiplication of marginal revenue and marginal product. So if you multiply marginal revenue and marginal product, you can see that the Q and Q will cancel, which is going to be then change in total revenue divided by change in L. Exactly, this is the definition, right? You guys see that? Any question over here up to this point?
Professor,
Yes.
can you please go a bit slower? You're going too fast.
But this is very basic. Okay, I will not go beyond this. Okay. So you can see that what I will stop. I will just finish at the optimal decision rule and then we will revisit again. So I will stop over here. Okay. So basically what we defined as marginal revenue product is how your total revenue changes when you hire one extra worker, right? So which is change in your total revenue with respect to labor. And we define marginal revenue is MR into MP. Your definition of MR is if your output increases by 1 unit, right? What is the change in your total revenue? That is your marginal revenue. Your marginal product is if you hire one additional worker, what is the change in your output? So basically your MRP by definition is change in your total revenue divided by change in labor, which is equal to the multiplication of MR into MP. So put these values back over here. And once you do it, you can see that the Q's, like you can cancel the Q's, right? The Q over here, delta Q over here, and delta Q over here. So this is basically delta TR divided by delta L right over here. Okay. So I will stop here. I will not go, but basically what I'm trying to, what is the chapter about? This chapter is about how to figure out with the short run labor demand. We have to figure out what is the optimal number of workers a farm should hire in the short run. That's my objective. So I have to figure out how many workers to hire. As a farm, my objective is to maximize profit. And in order to maximize profit, I have to hire workers, given that I have a fixed amount of capital, right? So how many workers should I hire? So I know that I have to employ the marginal decision rule. So I know that if I hire one extra worker, right, this extra worker will bring me some extra profit. So how does the extra worker bring me extra profit? If I hire one extra worker, this extra worker will produce 10 extra output, right? Why would you hire this person if he doesn't produce anything? So let's say I hire one extra worker, and this extra worker gives me 10 units of output. Okay, and I sell these 10 units of output in the market at a price 5 taka. So what is the extra income from this extra worker? 10 into 5, right? This worker produces 10 units and I sell each of these 10 units at 5 taka. So 50 taka is the revenue gain from this extra worker, right? That is marginal revenue product, which is the multiplication of marginal product into marginal revenue. Okay. What is marginal factor cost? If I hire this extra worker, I have to pay him. How much do I pay him? The salary that I pay him, the wage rate that I pay him. So the W is the marginal factor cost for hiring one extra worker. All right. So a farm will keep on hiring workers as long as the gain from hiring workers is higher than the cost of hiring this worker. What is the gain from hiring this worker? The marginal revenue product I get, the extra income from hiring this extra worker, 50 taka. So if the wage rate is 10 taka, since 50 is greater than 10, obviously I will hire this worker. So, but I know that, like, if I keep on hiring more and more worker, what will happen to my marginal product? There will be diminishing marginal product. So MP will decline. Okay. So if I keep on hiring more and more worker, at some point, marginal revenue product will become smaller than marginal factor cost. So in that situation, so if I hire one extra worker, I can sell his output for 8 taka, but I have to pay him 10 taka. Should I hire him? No.
No.
So I will not hire him. I will hire as long as the gain from hiring him is higher than the cost of hiring him, right? So this is basically MRP is greater or equal to MFC. And the profit maximizing level of employment will happen when MRP is equal to MFC. And MRP, this is exactly the definition we said. I hire one extra worker. This worker produces extra output, which is marginal product. And I sell this extra output at, like, in the market for extra revenue. That is my marginal revenue. So MRP is nothing but the interaction of marginal product and marginal revenue, right? Marginal revenue times marginal product. Marginal, so MRP is how your total revenue changes when you hire one extra worker, right? I hire extra worker, the extra income from this extra worker is my marginal revenue product. And my marginal revenue is how much revenue, extra revenue I get from selling one extra output. That is my marginal revenue. We know this, right? And marginal product is, if I hire one extra worker, how much output does this extra worker produce? This is the marginal productivity of labor. So marginal revenue product is the multiplication of MR and MP. So we are just going to put these two values over here and we can see the Q's can cross. So basically we are left with delta TR by delta L. Basically marginal revenue product tells you how much extra revenue you gain by hiring one extra worker. Okay, clear? No?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, so if it's clear, we will stop here. And I will ask you to read up to this point, right? I have posted the textbook and also the PowerPoint slides. So please at least read the PowerPoint slides, right? And try to understand what is going on, and please consult the textbook. So we will take it from here in next class, because I know, yes, we are going a little fast because this happens because we are using PowerPoints. I don't like PowerPoints because the lecture goes really fast. If I had to write all of this in the board, right, it would have taken so much time. All right. And also, like, that's why it's not optimal. I never like to teach with PowerPoints, even though I have all of these ready, but I never use them. I like to write in the, even though it's more work for me, but I think the students understand better if I write on the board, right? So we are going a little fast, but stop me. You did a good job, like, so yeah, tell me, like, there's no point in me going fast if I can't take you with me. If I leave you behind, I know this stuff already, so there is no no gain for me if I leave you behind. Okay, so stop me, please. Okay, thank you. So I will stop here today. Any question?
Professor.
Okay, so for next class, read up on this material before coming to class. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah.
All right. So let's just stop here for today, and we can meet again on Tuesday. No attendance because there are, like, I don't take attendance. I don't believe in this. If you believe that the class is useful, you will come. If you think that the class is not useful, you will not come. Right? As long as your benefit is higher than cost. That's what I've been teaching, right? This is what I've been saying. So I can't just go back on what I teach, right? I should not preach something if I don't believe in it.